Speaking of Washington, D.C., that's the lead story today.
Yeah, so it kind of goes with what we just saw in South Park. D.C. residents overwhelmingly opposed President Trump's federal takeover of the city's police department, and they do not believe his efforts actually will reduce crime in the district. That's all according to a new poll from the Washington Post and George Mason University. The poll finds 79% of people surveyed in D.C. oppose the president's takeover of the D.C. Police Department and the deployment of the National Guard. Only 17% support it. 65% of D.C. residents say Trump's efforts will not reduce violent crime. When it comes to Congress passing a law to extend the federal takeover, an overwhelming majority, 77%, say they oppose it. Still, Vice President J.D. Vance doubled down on claims that residents want a larger police presence during a visit with National Guard troops yesterday.
Polls show that a majority of D.C. residents don't support the Guard here. So what's your message to the majority of D.C. residents?
I'm highly skeptical that a majority of D.C. residents don't want their city to have better public safety and more reasonable safety standards within Washington, D.C. I don't know what poll you're talking about. Maybe the same polls that said Kamala Harris would win the popular vote by 10 points.
Vice President Defense Secretary Hegseth at Union Station yesterday, heckled by some D.C. residents there. At the station.
It was a South Park type entrance for the Vice President of the United States as he went in. Claire, we've been showing a poll over the past week or so that shows the same Washington Post outfit that did the polling that we showed this morning showed that 91% of Washington residents think crime is a problem, is a real problem, especially Black Washington residents and women. Black women at the top of that list of saying crime is a very serious problem. Same pollster goes out into the field and they go, yes, basically, it is a serious problem, but this isn't the answer. Which shows, again, you can have a good idea. If you overreach in the application of that idea, it does no good.
Yeah, and this is a tricky one politically because Democrats, I think, are really worried about seeming like they're against enforcing the law, which is not the case. I think what we really need to flesh out, and they've been playing a game to hide what's really going on with these arrests. I looked at the arrests through last weekend. The vast majority of them were in two categories: immigration, like 163 arrests for immigration. That's not what they were supposed to be doing.
Right.
And secondly, there was the category other. Well, that means anything from DUI to trespassing to petty theft. And then, you know how many people have been arrested for homicide, Joe? Two.
Yeah.
So if the problem is violent crime, you are taking people away from their jobs, like DEA, for example. You can trace a vast majority of the violent crime in this country to drug trafficking. So why are we taking DEA away from their job to enforce drug laws in this country to pick up people on immigration? It makes no sense. And they are acting like they're doing this big service. What they're really doing is they're flooding the system with low-level stuff which they don't have the prosecutors or the judges to handle. So it is complicated. It's not simple, but it's a tough one on messaging because we don't want to ever look like that anybody is against enforcing the law. That's not the issue. It's the Photoshop, the photo op they're doing and the way they're doing it that makes absolutely no sense if you know anything about crime.
And where. But send any reinforcements to Southeast, to North. I mean, send it to the areas that need it, that the residents would support it. But I mean, John Lemire, again, that's what we've been saying here all along, which is, okay, great. You want to help D.C. out? Fantastic. Forge a partnership. This hasn't been a partnership. This has been a show for a lot of people, South Carolina, National Guard, governors of southern states, some of whom have cities that have higher crime, higher violent crime per capita. You look at Monroe, Louisiana, where the Speaker of the House is from. He's got no position to talk on this bill because that's one of the most dangerous cities in the United States of America per capita, certainly a hell of a lot more dangerous than Washington, D.C. or San Francisco, California.
Yeah, we've seen the Washington Post has done a great job mapping where these Guard members have been, and they're the vast majority not in high crime areas. It's been a little more the last couple of days. They've moved them into some of those neighborhoods. But for the most part, they're by Union Station, Lincoln Memorial, big photo op places. The White House, I was talking to some officials there yesterday, they still like what they're seeing here. They like the idea they're tough on crime. They like the images they're creating. That's why they sent out the Vice President, the Defense Secretary, Stephen Miller, were all out yesterday defending this. And I guess, like South Park, that clip was the only bit we could play because the rest of it, thanks to the hecklers, we can't air on morning television. But we're seeing in that poll what I feel like a lot of D.C. residents have said from day one. Yes, even those who do believe we have a crime problem, the city should handle this differently. They don't want it to be like this, David Drucker, because they don't want it's overreach, yes, but also just the idea of federal troops like this, the precedent it could set. And we know it will be harder for the administration to do this in other cities, even though the president has talked about it. But even there, you're Washington.
And by the way, don't cut our budget.
Right.
$1 billion at the same time.
Exactly right. $1 billion, House Republicans, to cut $1 billion, money that could have been used for quality of life and law enforcement in better ways than this show of force that I think most D.C. residents, the poll suggests, don't want and think it's purely political.
Yeah, look, I think from the get-go, there have been some contradictions here. I mean, the president said he doesn't think the D.C., the District of Columbia needs a bigger police force. And I think a lot of D.C. residents would disagree. I think what you also saw with the vice president answering that question there is he responded to a question about the poll with an answer to a different question about a different poll that wasn't asked. Yes, D.C. residents are concerned about crime. Yes, I think many D.C. residents would like a larger police force. They don't necessarily want National Guard troops and federal police authorities all over tourist sites. And there have been complaints that there hasn't been enough of these additional forces in areas of high crime in the district that tourists never go to because there's no reason for them to be there. I think there are two issues here for us to remember, and Senator McCaskill was getting at this, right? I mean, there's the issue of how do D.C. residents feel about this, and as we've talked about here, I am one. I've been one for 20 years. I experience this on a daily basis. And there's the issue of how voters outside of Washington who have their own concerns about public safety view the reaction to this by the political parties as a proxy for crime where they live. And it's important if you're going to find that the president is overreaching. And this is as a political matter. You talk to voters. If you think the president is overreaching, it's important to acknowledge that crime is a problem, but that there are actual effective ways, if you believe this.
People are going to forget.
People are never going to forget. The problem is, do we have any power? What do we do? You know, what do you do? You definitely can change the way you vote, like if it comes up again. But the problem is, this is a bipartisan issue.
It's bipartisan. It's not. I don't know. I heard as a Democratic hoax.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. Well, it's certainly not a hoax if you go to jail. Certainly not a hoax if Ghislaine Maxwell's in jail too. So like she's in jail for sex trafficking. Excuse me, she's in jail for sex trafficking. But the question is to who? Who's she in jail? You have to be sex trafficking to somebody in order to go to jail, right?
Yeah.
So who? How's that work? She's been in jail for years. So like, how's that work?
That's podcaster Joe Rogan challenging President Trump's claim that the Jeffrey Epstein case is simply a Democratic hoax. During an interview this week with the musician Jesse Wells, Rogan questioned how the deceased sex offender and his convicted associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, did not have any additional accomplices in their crimes. And there is a development this morning with the Epstein files. A federal judge has denied the Justice Department's request to unseal grand jury transcripts in that case. The judge, based here in New York, found the government had not reached the high bar necessary to unseal the transcripts and suggested there was not much there anyway. The judge also called the request for the records a diversion from the mountain of files on Epstein that the government had already compiled. Additionally, the judge said another factor in his decision was, quote, possible threats to victims' safety and privacy. The DOJ declined to comment on the ruling. Welcome to the fourth hour here of Morning Joe, just past 9 a.m. here on the East Coast, 6 o'clock out west. With us, we have the president of the National Action Network and host of MSNBC's Politics Nation, the Reverend Al Sharpton, He's here, we swear. Several correspondent at Vanity Fair and host of the Fast Politics podcast, Molly Jong Fast, co-founder and CEO of All In Together, Lauren Leader, and Politics Bureau Chief and Senior Political Columnist at Politico, Jonathan Martin. Great group, guys. Thank you for being here. J. Martin, we'll start with you. On the Epstein story, here it is now mid-August, the dog days of August, if you will. Yeah. Republicans went home early. They didn't want to talk about this anymore. They wanted to make this story go away. But it is simply, at least let's talk politics first, as best as Donald Trump is trying, he can't quite shake it.
Well, first of all, I was amazed to see that in 40 years, Jeff Spicoli has not aged. The guest there on the Joe Rogan podcast. But besides that, look, the fact is that the more that folks are back in their districts hearing about this from people, from voters, and by the way, it's from normie voters, John. It's not from political insiders who are asking about the intricacies of the Build Back or the Big Beautiful Bill, rather. This is from people like, as you just played on that Rogan segment, who were listening to like the Joe Rogans of the world. And that's the challenge. And that's why I think the Trump folks tried to release the grand jury testimony, because they're trying to get something out there, right? They're trying to put some information out there that's going to pacify voters. See, nothing here. And they couldn't even do that because a federal judge is worried about, oh, yeah, by the way, there's victims here in this case. It's not just some conspiracy theory. It's actually a tragedy, too. Yeah, I think, John, they come back in September. I think especially in the House, where these folks are facing re-election, facing primaries next year, I think they're going to have to do something to pacify the voters on the Epstein issue.
I think that's right. I think this is a storyline that we're going to still be checking on and hearing a lot from.
The people are furious, and they're confronting Trump at the White House in polling. Trump has a problem with regular voters who absolutely have a different set of priorities. Now, sometimes those people still want law and order. They still want justice. But Trump thinks justice means putting a few cops that probably don't want to be there on the corner to brutalize a city of predominantly black Americans. What the people want is the Epstein files, Donald. What the people want is the rich and wealthy and well-connected like you held accountable when they commit crimes, everything from the Epstein type stuff, obviously, but also white-collar stuff. That's what they want. They want justice for the 99%. They don't want a trivial show of force aimed at scaring law-abiding citizens. And so people are making their voices heard. People see the hypocrisy, Donald. They see that when January 6th happened, you did nothing because you wanted the thugs to win, and yet on a regular period in D.C., when, again, crime rates are falling year over year in that city, now's the time you send in the National Guard. It's not about law. It's not about order. It's about you exerting power and you exerting white supremacy. That's simple. And people see through your BS. If it was about public safety, you'd be sending the National Guard to some red cities that have been getting worse, rural areas of America that have brutal per capita crime rates. But you don't give a damn. You don't want justice. You want demonization.